Didn't matter.
No.
My favorite Dodger though.
Months.
Next Wednesday,
He's my favorite.
go get it out of the ocean.
Yeah, that's right. That's Mary's favorite.
Max.
My Max did it.
Go get it out of the ocean.
Yeah, go get it out of the ocean. Still, no one's picked up Bumgarner. Are you
I
surprised?
know,
Really?
nobody.
Because Dodger, the Giants, not Giants, Arizona DFA'd him, got rid of him, and nobody's picked him up.
Is he over the hill?
Yeah, he's pretty bad.
What happened?
As long as the Dodgers don't pick him up. They're known to pick up old has-beens.
Washed up. The best behind them. Not anybody here. Nobody here in this room right now are washed up. Hello, Elise.
Hi, Rabbi. How are you today?
Good. We were reminiscing, going over the Dodger victory today. So,
Oh, I saw them yesterday, Monday.
but were you rooting for the Dodgers?
No, I was rooting for the Phils, 13-4. What a loss.
Well, that's what I was saying, because sometimes you're rooting for the Dodgers, and that's
Only
good.
when they're not playing the Phils.
I know. That's what I was gonna say.
So who had 13?
You have a good. Oh, the Dodgers had 13. That's what she's saying. She was rooting for the Dodgers. Did you wait? So did you go to the game?
What?
No, I was talking to Elise. She's up there. Elise, did you go to the game?
I went to the game Monday night. Yeah. My
actually did.
undergrad university had a big event there because it was Philadelphia. So Gordon and I went. And we got a Dustin Hayes bobblehead that I will be glad to give you the next time I see
Oh,
you.
that's very sweet. But I
But the
will
game
tell
was
you.
awful.
I will.
No, it was great.
Well, I think that was the game though that Trey Turner had a home run though, right?
Yeah. Gordon and I left at the start of the 8th inning. It was just hopeless.
Yeah, it was pretty. Well, that's a big blowout. Even, but today it was at the very last. It was the last hit of the game. Was Max Muncy hit a grand slam. It's a great way to end the
Oh,
game.
wow.
They were tied. It was 6-6. Well, he gave up a run and then it was tied. And then the Dodgers had a walk-off grand slam and they won 10-6. So Max Muncy hit a grand slam. But they were down 4-0. No, not especially, not with this team. Good team. Welcome, everybody. Welcome people who are online. We have some more people that are coming. No. Oh, wait, you didn't hear about this.
No.
Well, I haven't talked to your cousin yet. No, for the people who weren't here Tuesday. We got tossed off of Facebook because we had too much sex talk. Look at Margot, got all excited. We didn't even talk about sex talk, but they threw us off. They said your content was sexual and what was the other thing? Nudity and sexuality. All we were doing is reading the Bible. I wasn't naked. I don't know about you, but you were here. I would have remembered that. Facebook kicked us off.
Did they realize that it was the Bible that you're reading?
I told them. They kicked us off numerous times. And so I actually showed the message and then they kicked me off again when I showed the message. It said,
Okay, I was kicked out of my home ministry.
not for being too sexual though, right?
So they said I was running a house.
They'll repute. No, this was the message that I got. I got a message that,
Show it.
yeah, you're right. I shouldn't show it. It says your post, it did say your post is now back on Facebook. No, this was yeah, I will show it. I'm stupid. I'm going to show it. There's two people. No, I don't know. Yeah, I already started us on Facebook. We're on Facebook. Yeah, no, we were thrown off numerous times. And I basically showed that the issue is that Facebook has now got these bots that they, if they think that you're talking about something, that is,
But I have a solution.
you have a solution?
Yeah, just need to show just the Hebrew.
Oh, yeah, great. That's great. That's gonna help everyone else. who Doesn't read Hebrew.
Get thrown out.
Yeah, so we
Sure.
were thrown off
Nobody
of
can say they
Facebook.
can't read Hebrew.
No, we were.
Why is those throwing you off?
By the way, the more times I say that, we're now up to 4 people watching us on Facebook right now. For everybody who's on Facebook right now, that's watching us on Facebook, there is no nudity going on. The more I say that, by the way, there's more people are gonna jump on. But no, there was,
Guesswork.
yeah. But we had, yeah, we were thrown off and, yeah, somebody actually, I don't have permission necessarily to repeat this, but he texted me that. I thought it was funny, but I didn't ask for his permission to share this. I won't say who said it, but somebody who was in our class that day said, no, I mean, you can guess, but I'm not gonna tell you. I will tell you it wasn't. After thinking about this discussion today, I believe you're missing a great marketing opportunity. Why not advertise our Beyond the Torah study as analysis that's been banned on Facebook for sexual content? My guess is you'll triple the number of participants in 2 weeks.
Oh, that's funny.
So it's very funny, but I didn't have permission to read that. But it is, yes, he is very funny. And somebody said that who was there yesterday. But I'm not going to say who because I don't have permission. I didn't ask his permission to share that. But I thought that was funny.
I think you should do that. You should advertise on Facebook.
Banned from Facebook.
Yeah.
We've been banned from Facebook. We've been kicked off of Facebook. Here we are. Here's the rest of our people. We were waiting for you guys because we knew you were coming, Solomons. So welcome everybody who's on. It's only 7:03. We kind of came on a little bit earlier today. Yeah, they're on, but you can say hi to them. They're all here. Come over here. They'll see you. The Schulmans will see you there.
Hey, Joyce.
There you go. There's Joyce, everybody. Joyce was teaching here yesterday.
Yeah.
Joyce she didn't hear the story. Did you tell her? You didn't tell her.
No,
We were just talking about, we got thrown off of Facebook yesterday
You're kidding.
for sexual content, sexual and nudity. There's no sexuality. I promise you, there was no nudity.
Anyway, I'm saying hi to all.
What? Who?
Hi, Joyce.
Hi, Joyce.
Mike? Which chiropractor you go to? That's right, good. Factory. It's a factory.
Yeah, it's a factory. It's a money price.
Do you ever have that girl Tara work on you?
No, you see the muscle guy? She's new.
Longer, yeah, she's great.
Told me it was good.
No, no,
Who did your
only
job?
she,
I have no idea
Um,
what she said.
What profession?
the young guy.
Jason?
Huh?
Goss? You can see him Friday. Oh, too funny.
Just been with-
What a world.
And I've been an
Yeah.
actress.
You just talk about fast.
Summer stuff.
What?
Talk about fast days. Maybe you don't know what fast-
Fast days? You think the fast days was the trigger? Anyways, so everybody's settling in. This is a great session tonight. We're gonna have a great text. I can't always guarantee great text, but tonight I can. So everybody hopefully is. I know there's a lot of noise here, but it's fine. We're all getting excited. We're all getting set down and we've got a bunch of people online right now, and we have a bunch of people on Facebook, we said. And the more we get banned from Facebook, the bigger the audience is going to be. That's right. So welcome everybody there. And we went through our Dodger wrap-up talk already, which was they're on a little bit of a streak right now, so that was good. And Lise, even though she's rooting for the Phillies this week, she's normally rooting for the Dodgers, so that's good. But we're going to take a look this week at Korach. Last week we looked at another great portion, Shlach Lecha, which is the story of the spies, and we read that kind of over the last 2 weeks. We read about that from chapter 13 and 14. We read about the spies. And then last week, we also read this little part about the tzitzit, which is an extra. Yeah, why didn't they ban us last week? Last week, I was talking about prostitution and harlots.
We weren't banned.
I know we weren't banned last week.
Sure.
Should have been. That was much more provocative. Anyway, so I told you the story of the Mishnah. Talmud. I shared that story, the Talmudic story. Yeah, that didn't have any problem for some reason. So the only thing we talked about yesterday was eunuchs. And that maybe was what we couldn't figure it out. Anyways, this week is not an issue of sexuality. It is an issue of government and leadership. And there's definitely a lot in this portion. I think over the last few years, we've really been thinking about a lot about how this portion is relevant to us today, especially when it comes to the political environment we live in, more so today than we did probably, a generation ago, where America was definitely had some. There was definitely an issue. We've always, I guess, had an issue of charisma and political leaders looking and behaving in ways that are kind of presidential or regal or with decorum. And then like now it's become an issue of like, what are the limits that we're willing to go to in order to, almost we've devolved to the level of like, what would somebody have to do now not to be eligible for to be president? Because I remember, you probably remember this 40 years ago. There were people that were talking about whether Ronald Reagan could be president because he was divorced. No, I remember that. I'm not making that up.
Kennedy, because he would take orders from the Pope.
Kennedy for that.
Yeah.
That was political and you could say religious and whatever. I'm not saying I'm not justifying it, but I'm talking about on the personal level, whether that was something that could disqualify somebody for and it's gotten ridiculous to this point.
Because he had been mentally ill. Go on.
Well, there's another issue with him too. He was part Jewish.
Not too, yeah.
And everyone knew it. So, but I'm talking about what happens with people's backgrounds and things like that. Today, there's issues of this today and maybe again, when we read it 25, 30 years ago, this portion, we thought about it in different ways, but we always read this portion, Korach, and think about leadership. And we reflect on, politics, and you'll see why. So again, last week we were reading about the spies and the fact that the people get this horrible punishment that none of the adult men are going to be able to come into the land except for Caleb and Joshua. And everyone else is going to die for their lack of faith. Everyone who's 20 years and up. So that's what happened last week. And now this week builds on that and maybe has a little continuity and a little bit of that in here when we read this portion. So this is the next incident in the desert. So we're going to read this portion, this part. This is the beginning of another Torah portion. It's the beginning of another chapter. It's definitely the beginning of, or again, today we're going to have a unit that if you haven't been here before, I definitely would have helped if you were here last week to read the story of the spies and how the people were kept out of going to the promised land. But this is a unit in itself, and you'll see why. So the portion begins, now Korach, the son of Ishar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, he took himself along with Datan and Abiram, sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Pelet, descendants of Reuben, to rise up against Moses together with 250 Israelites, chieftains of the community chosen in the assembly, men of repute. So before we go any further, those two verses, what do they tell us? Some really important things. So it says that this guy Korach, along with Datan, Abiram, and On, they're from Reubenites, and Korach, Datan, Abiram, and On are Reubenites. They're from the oldest tribe, right? Reuben is the oldest son of Jacob, and therefore it's kind of like the oldest tribe. And then Korach is from the tribe of Levi, which is Moses' tribe. It's Aaron's tribe. It's the tribe of the priests. But it's a little bit weirder than that, or maybe more disturbing than that. It tells us that Korach is the son of Ishar, and he's the son of Kohat, his great-grandfather, right? So he's the son of Ishar, he's the grandson of Kohat, and then he's the great-grandson of Levi. Well, you don't have to go back as far as the Levites. That's a few generations. Again, that's like the 4 generations. He's the same generation as Moses and Aaron, who are both great-grandsons of Levi. But not only that, they both have the same grandfather. There's the Kohathites, the Gershonites, and the Merarites. So Moses and Korach, and so Moses and Aaron, the brothers, and Korach are cousins. They're first cousins. They have the same grandfather, Kohat. So he's actually Moses's cousin. That's a pretty close relationship. They have the same grandfather. Now, again, they may have had different experiences growing up in Egypt, but he's from the tribe of priests, tribes that already have gotten distinctions, right? They've already been given the responsibilities of taking care of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, of taking care of the ark, of helping the priests, of helping that subgroup within their tribe, which are Aaron's family. So the priests at this time, the whole tribe of Levi has some great importance. And so they lead this revolt against Moses. It says they rise up against Moses. And there's also, again, 250 Israelites who are heads of the community. So these are also not just random people. These are people who already have been given responsibility. These are leaders. These are leaders. They combined against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far. For all the community are holy, all of them, and Adonai is in their midst. Why then do you raise yourself above Adonai's congregation?" Now remember, we read a couple weeks ago that Aaron and Miriam challenged Moses for leadership, and they get shot down. I mean, Miriam gets this skin disease. So Moses has already dealt with the challenge from within his own family. This is not only within his own family, but amongst the other leaders who come against him and say, why are you doing this? Everybody is holy. And we've already heard that, by the way, too. We just read that Moses actually asked for everybody to get a little bit of this divine energy, if you will. So all these things have already happened, but now they've come up and they've said, you've gone too far. Now, the first question we have about this is, what's this about? He's gone too far. Why? What did he do? What did he do?
So far, we haven't even.
No. Now, the obvious answer of juxtaposition of what just happened is that they don't like the fact that Moses has now told them that they're not going into the land. Right? I mean, it makes sense. They can't go into the land. They're going to all die in the desert. Moses, you don't have the right to tell us that. Now, we already saw that some of you guessed that people were going to try to go in anyways, which we saw they did, and they got defeated. But, they don't want to be told you're going to have to wait 40 years, and there will be no time that you get to come into the land. You will die in the desert. You're never coming into the land. That's one possibility. That's a logical possibility. But we don't know that. And their challenge to Moses, by the way, is a legitimate one, which is everyone's holy. God's in our midst. Why are you better than us? Isn't everybody equal in God? Everyone's equal. And so their challenge on the face of it was actually kind of a democratic challenge, which is everybody should have a vote. Everybody should have a chance to make a decision. Why is your decision more important than mine? So their challenge is actually one that on the face of it, and again, they weren't raised in the United States. They weren't raised after the age of reason and these ideas of liberty and things that came out of the age of reason, the French philosophers, Voltaire, and all these other people that the American philosophers and social scientists that helped design our country. They didn't have those ideas necessarily, but they did believe that everyone was holy, that everyone was created in God's image. So their challenge is really not one based on anything other than, aren't we all? equal? Aren't we all holy? So their challenge really doesn't seem to be based on anything necessarily wrong on the face of it. They might even be motivated for it. But the rabbis notice that it doesn't say what precipitated this. It doesn't say. And because it doesn't say, and because it leaves that part out, the rabbis get from this that this was nothing other than a challenge to Moses' leadership by other people who wanted to be in power. They wanted to be in power. Yeah, Margot.
Wouldn't you have to define what the word equal means?
What do you mean?
What is equal? That you're equal to, that Moses is equal to the people he's leading? That, isn't he a little above that?
Well, yes. So some people would have said that's ridiculous. We've already heard that Moses is not on the same level as everybody else in his ability to talk with God.
That's right, he's the only one.
God's
that God
already-
talks to.
God's already
directly.
told people that. He told people that after the Miriam and Aaron incident. But their answer to him is essentially, yeah, but let's say you talk to God more. This is the argument. You talk to God more than we do. But there's 600,000 of us. No, I mean, that's the men, by the way. I'm not saying there's millions of, I would come out to millions of people, but there's 600,000 of us. So even if God is speaking to Moses, and even if God is chosen Moses, how's one guy calling the shots for 600,000 other guys? You're telling 600,000 men that you're all going to die in the desert. What do you, and so 250 of them, plus another 4, come up and say, no way, Moses, you're not, you're definitely not going to, you're not going to tell us what to do. So, yeah, I mean, maybe they thought God talked to them more, maybe, I mean, but does that trump everything else? I got to be careful of using that word today, by the way. But because honestly, what's really going on here? And so the rabbis actually derive from this that this is an ego challenge. This is nothing other than the people saying, or these leaders saying, we get to call the shots. You don't get to call the shots, Moses. We get to call the shots.
But.
Yeah.
If this happened, according to what the Bible showing, after those people that tried to go in got killed,
Yeah.
why would they be uprising again?
Why would they still be uprising? Well, it's a good question because you'd say, didn't they just learn?
Exactly.
But their argument could be, well, Moses, and this could have been honestly what Korach would say. I'm a Levite. Let's grab the ark and take the ark with us. We'll go up with the ark next time. And not only that, these are 250 leaders. We don't know who decided to go in last time. That was just, maybe average everyday soldiers or whatever that said, hey, we're going to go up. This is the leadership of the community, or at least some of the leadership of the community that combined, because it says the 250 people were chieftains of the community. They were leaders already. By the way, chosen in the assembly, right? It says actually to some extent that they've been given this power of leadership. So they've already been chosen to be leaders by the people. And they're saying, look, there's a whole lot of us, who are you to be able to call the shots? So
It's not calling the shots, God's calling.
correct. But what happens, and it even happens in democracies, is that there are political leaders, especially in our country, but even in parliamentary democracies, even in like England, the people felt Winston Churchill had gone too far, and and they loved him, but at a certain point they said he'd gone too far. But in our system, where you have a president that's from a whole different branch of government, you can have a president who's can become very unpopular amongst his own party, and they don't even want him. So that does happen, where the president can't even control his own party who's in power. And that happened. I mean, folks, I don't need to tell you, that's happened several times in the last 20 or 30 years. It might even be happening now. But the reality is that happens, where the party in charge doesn't even have the head leader doesn't have the backing of the people behind them. So we've seen it happen, and we've seen it happen. We see it happening right now. It happened to two of our last presidents, actually. It happened to Obama, and it also happened to George Bush Jr. So anyways, this is the situation we could be having here. The rabbis actually posit a whole nother idea too, which is the reason that the Torah doesn't tell us what the issue was is because the Torah is actually teaching us a really important lesson. And there's a famous discussion of this Torah portion in the Talmud. And the Talmud says that arguments like this, ones that are based on ego, we don't preserve what they're about. We don't know what it's about because it wasn't for the sake of heaven. Arguments for the sake of heaven, we keep those alive. And the whole Talmud, to some extent, is an argument. It's a discussion and debate between different rabbis about different things. And in some cases, schools of thought, like the most famous, and that's what the Talmud says in this tractate. What is an argument for the sake of heaven? The arguments of Hillel and Shammai. And Hillel and Shammai, they were rabbis who lived 2,000 years ago, and they had schools. They had their own academies. And the academies debated and in some cases really didn't like each other because they had different approaches to things. They had different ways of looking at things. And we normally, in the Talmud, and in Jewish practice, we normally follow the school of Hillel, right? Was considered the rabbi that we follow. And interestingly, the rabbis say we follow Hillel not because he was smarter than Shammai, but because he was more compassionate and because he taught his students the rules of Shammai in addition to teaching them his rules. Well, there's legends that they knew each other, but the Talmud constantly gives us these stories of like people. There's the famous story of the convert, the prospective convert, who goes to Shammai and says to him, "Teach me the Torah, right? Convert me while I stand on one leg." And Shammai chases him away. It says he drives him away with a stick. And then that convert comes to Hillel and says, "Teach me the Torah, standing on one leg." And he says famously to him, "What is hateful to you, don't do to others." Golden rule. The rest is commentary. Go and study it. Everyone forgets the last part, but that's the famous story of Hillel with the convert, right? So that's an example of the Hillel Shammai differences. But Shammai, according to the Talmud, was himself a very great teacher and very astute, but he wasn't as compassionate and patient as Hillel. And there's a lot of arguments between them. They're interesting arguments, and the Talmud keeps them so that you and I can read them 2,000 years later. I'll give you one example. Hillel and Shammai argument. This was one of my favorite ones, but there's a lot of them. But Hillel and Shammai had a debate, and this one is an easy one because you'll know this one. You just didn't know that there was different teachings about this. I know Mike remembers. There's a tradition that you all know. Every year at Hanukkah, we light a Hanukkah menorah, right? And how do we light the Hanukkah menorah? We add one candle each day. And again, if people right to left or people get all confused. Don't worry about that right now. But you add a candle every day. That's what Hillel taught, and that's what we do. Shammai had a different approach. Shammai said you start off with 8 candles and you take one down each time. You start with 8 and you work down. Why? Because every day that the oil was burning in the menorah, the oil went down. It didn't go down all the way, but it went down a little bit. So you recreate what the menorah was like in the temple. Makes sense. Hillel said, no, we increase a candle each day because the miracle increased each day. Every day that oil lasted, a day that it wasn't supposed to, the miracle was bigger and bigger, and we increased the miracle. And that's why we do it. So there's good arguments on both sides. And so we keep the arguments in the Talmud so that you know that there's differences of opinion when it came to how to do it. If people don't follow, it's interesting you say that. There's nobody that follows Shammai. And again, people say you're not supposed to do it because you're going against the tradition that we've had for thousands of years in doing it this way. But it shows you that these different teachings were kept. And there is showing you that there's a logic and there's a rationale for doing these things. Look, people thought the concept of increasing the miracle was the important thing we're doing at Hanukkah anyways, because we're celebrating the miracle. So anyways, that was the good Hillel and Shammai, but there's many of them. There's many Hillel and Shammai debates in the Talmud, and some of them are really intricate, but that one's an easy one, and that one's one that you can understand. And that's why Hillel and Shammai We keep those arguments because they're machlochet l'shem shamayim. They're arguments for the sake of heaven. And people have written, there's even books called Arguments for the Sake of Heaven, because it's such a wonderful title for what Judaism teaches, which is that we teach that there's a debate. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Karaites not celebrate Hanukkah?
Karaites,
This is not in the Bible.
no, it's not that they do celebrate. Karaites don't have an issue with things that aren't in the Bible. Your question is because it's in the Talmud and they don't follow the Talmud. But Hanukkah was already part of Jewish tradition by that period. So I don't know exactly what Karaites do on Hanukkah, but I do know that they have Hanukkah. But it's not in the 5 books, but because it came out later, it's not can come in. It's not a mitzvah to celebrate Hanukkah necessarily from a biblical standpoint, but
Yeah, you can. I trust you.
okay. So back to the miracles. So or back to Hillel and Shammai, the arguments for the sake of heaven is an important concept in Judaism, and it's one that the rabbis taught. From this text, we understand that arguments that we have that are ego-based are not ones that we're going to keep. We're not going to remember those. The ones that are not of substance, the ones that are because someone didn't like someone else and had an issue, we're not going to remember that. Why is it in the Torah? Well, because this is a critical story, right? There's a critical moment here that we're about to reach. But the reason that they said that is missing, because we want to know what it is. We want to know what precipitated this rebellion. But they said the reason we really don't know it is because of that, because we are not supposed to remember arguments. We don't, if we don't know, if the substance was not important and it wasn't something that was where there was a truth on both sides, we're not going to remember it. We're not going to give it the dignity of putting it in. And that's the way they looked at it. And there's something special about that, because it reminds us that the arguments that we have that are really for nothing, they shouldn't be kept. They shouldn't be kept alive. You know, the arguments within a family that are over nothing shouldn't be kept. I mean, that doesn't mean there's not arguments in a family that are substantive. Yes. Well, there's a lot of yes, but a lot of times, as Joyce is saying, a lot of the arguments are not substantive, and sometimes they are. And again, we think about it in our country. I mean, there's arguments that are going on that are important arguments, and there are truths on both sides, and the arguments need to be had, and they shouldn't be dismissed out of hand. And in some cases, again, they're not. The reason that they're important and the reason why they take us into and when we spend so much time on them is because they deserve to have time spent on them, but not on the fluff, not on the stuff that's not important. That's, I mean, the argument over how to spend money and over a debt ceiling, that's an important thing to discuss. This isn't something that we should just be saying, well, you're going to do. No, you have to have an important discussion about it. And people should be able to hear the truths on every side. They're going to cost jobs. It's going to do this. It's going to take the economy down. You need to hear, okay, but it's also, there has to be a limit on spending. There have to be practical applications of how we spend our money as a country. This isn't not our money. The debt's going to be bought up by the Chinese. Do we want more of our debt being held by a foreign? I mean, all of these are important discussions to have. So there's truths on both sides. And I will tell you something else, that there's truths on both sides that we've diminished and we haven't been listening to for the last 40 years, is the issue of abortion and the issue of how do we approach a critical life issue. And to dismiss it and to say, well, can't have that discussion, it diminishes everybody. I've said it before. I think the primary decision on this does rest with the woman. I believe that. That doesn't mean that there aren't women on different sides of this issue. And I really do think, for the most part, men have to take responsibility and they have to be part of the discussion, and they shouldn't sit it out necessarily. But the discussion really has to be had by women and be made by women with the support of people. And I do believe there should be a national mandate on it. I think it should be a national issue. I don't think it should be decided by a local community. I think it should be decided life and death issues, including to the death penalty, I believe there should be a nationwide thing. I don't think you should kill someone in one state and be able to not be executed, and in another state. That doesn't make sense to me. Life and death issues that are beginning of life, end of life, euthanasia, those issues those should not be done by, because I believe it encourages our country to be fractured on critical issues. And I think that certain things need to be held by our country. Certain values need to be held by our country. Anyways, that's my opinion on it. But I do think that these are discussions that need to be had, and I think that they should be kept, and I think that the different sides should be kept. And then we do that, by the way, when we have a judicial, when we have justices decide on cases, we hear the minority opinion. The minority opinion is kept. And sometimes later on, 20 or 30 years later, that minority opinion has value. And somebody says, somebody wrote this in a minority opinion in 1972 and comes back. So these ideas are important in our country of respecting different points of view and understanding that there's truths that can be on opposing sides, but that yet there can still be truths within those. And those are arguments for the sake of heaven. And interestingly enough, they're oftentimes on these issues that are critical for life, death, and really get to what our values are, to establish what our values are as people, as human beings, as Americans too. But I hope that to some extent, these are universal values, because I have news for you. If abortion is illegal in America or it's legal in America, I'm not saying I would impose that same rule on every country in the world. I don't think we should invade them if they don't have the same rules as we do. But it seems to me like those are universal human truths. It's either, there's either situations where someone can be executed or there aren't, and it doesn't matter where you live. I mean, that to me is just, you can't have a rule in America and another rule somewhere else when it comes to life and death, to me. I mean, that's my belief. I mean, there's certain things that I think are universal human truths. I don't know. Bless you. So these are the arguments that we're supposed to have, and we have them, that we keep the sides, we record the sides and we let them be heard. That's a society, I think, that Judaism wants us to have. John.
If this is the most serious rebellion that Moses had to do,
Mhm.
and it was some.
We haven't read it all yet. Just deal with what we've had so far.
Crux of talking about the beginning. I don't remember anything in the Torah so far that I've read, but I promised it, that discusses the government and formation and the chain of command.
You haven't missed it, other than Moses was supposed to establish courts or judges that listen to his lower cases. That's what we've heard so far.
Right. So there's no establishment of elections or so. Right. And so the author, right, who wrote this, and I have to note in my book, it indicates King James Bible, New English Bible, New English Bible, and other Christian translations differ chapter and verse to this greatly. I don't know what that means or what the purpose of the footage is, but they just said it. Anyway, my point is, and you spent some time on these first three
Verses, yeah.
Verse statements, is it just weren't happy with the leadership.
Oh,
We're happy with, but there's no framework for elections right back then. It was very
yeah.
What's the right word?
Well, it was nebulous, or let's put it this way: the chain of command was God to Moses, and then to the next people.
I understand, right? But
So here's the problem. On one hand, this is a moment in time where the people are still slaves. They're still slaves. In that 40-year period hasn't started, right? I mean, it's just starting. They've just only been out of Egypt for about 2 years, right? So they've had a year and a half or so of time to not be slaves. So they're still even understanding what it is to be a free person to some extent. Now, that being said, there definitely is a sense that you and I have that, we have that ability. And even you get it even in some of the discussions, ancient discussions. Hey, what do you expect out of these people? They don't know. Like they didn't know any better. But there is this sense too of yeah, but people are people and people behave like this now when they should know better. And so there's this kind of, well, isn't this an archetype? Isn't this an example for us? Isn't this an example for you and I today, thousands of years later, when we say to ourselves, what do we do with a leader that we're frustrated with? And look, I'm not going to be the first. I'm going to tell you, you might have already heard this. There are so many people now who've said, as they've read this portion over the last 5 or 6 years, isn't the last 6 years of what we've been dealing with? Aren't we like this generation? Because to some extent,
You go back to the start of this country.
yeah.
Just read the Federalist, but just read the papers.
So there was that, right?
The beginning of this country was even more.
Yeah, because they weren't really sure what that was going to look like. For the last 200 and something years, though, you assume that the president that you elected, you were going to have to stick it out for 4 years.
I understand.
There was one impeachment between 1770, whatever, 1780,
That's a
and
disingenuous argument because the modern issues that have recently occurred are mainly political, right? So to take that out of, to remove that discussion,
no,
to remove that discussion, we're talking about the governmental framework that we're discussing in brief phrases.
yeah, but people.
They didn't have that.
But people who've said today, as they read this portion, what do people do when they don't like the leadership and they don't feel that they've elected the leadership? Do they feel empowered to rise up in a way that they haven't in the past? Maybe again, going back to what you're saying, to the first days of our republic, where people were trying to figure out what was the government even going to look like. Is the president going to be directly elected? Is it going to be, all of these kinds of things? But this is correct. And so this is the first time in maybe 200 years, 230 years, where we're starting to say, but can we get rid of a president midway through?
Well, my point is in regards to this, right?
Oh, no, I know, but I'm just saying this portion in particular, over the last 5 years, people have been reading this and they've been like, well, what does this teach us about that? What does this teach us about the nature of patience with leadership, with people who are saying this is demagoguery, with people coming up with challenges? I mean, all of these things are all things that people are now reading when they read this portion. They can't read this portion anymore without thinking about that. I mean, I'll give you an example. When we read the Tazria Matsora story about quarantining people, when AIDS broke in the mid-'80s, everyone read those Tazria and Matsora portions. Everybody started reading those about, well, what does this teach us about AIDS? What can we say about AIDS? And then it came back during COVID where people were reading Tazria Matsora and talking about COVID and being on lockdown. So there are things that pop up and we say to ourselves, oh my gosh, this is too weird. We're reading this and what can we derive from this? Because the Torah may be teaching us a lesson for us today, right? What lesson can we derive? In the last 5 years, people always read Korach and thought about elections and talked about politics. And I'm sure there was a time in other, presidencies and things like that where I haven't gone back into the 70s and read Torah, Divrei Torah from the Nixon era and stuff like that. But I wonder, and again, I'm not sure. My guess is that they didn't do this. But for the last 5 years, congregations across the country, rabbis have been giving sermons as they got to Korach and done nothing but talk about Trump. Nothing. I mean, I'm telling you.
If I did the same thing during Clinton.
They did no, they didn't. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. They didn't. They did it for a few years during Clinton. And I'm saying I don't think they did it in the 70s. I think the idea, as people have gotten to the point where they're
LBJ had his own issues.
People generally didn't talk about that in the synagogue like they do today. It's gotten a lot more.
I can't tell.
I know, but it's gotten a lot more political, and it's gotten a lot more where people are saying, yeah, but this isn't about politics anymore. It's also about ego, and it's also about this issue of,
These three are about chain of command and leadership and how does it change?
but this is the first time that we've, again, with the exception of the Watergate era, which ended up being solved without an impeachment and without a removal of a president.
You know what?
But
It
this,
was a removal.
okay, but this is the first time, this is the first time when it's actually happened while in our lifetimes, and when we've seen it play out over several years, where people are saying, well, what does this teach us about today? And the message that congregations have had is look at what we're dealing with today. And again, I mean, obviously 90% of the sermons are going to be pretty critical of Trump, but this era has entered into this time where people look at this and say, well, what can we take away from this? And again, if you look at the Divrei Torah over the last few years, also when they're more accessible, you've seen more and more people try to tie the current political situation to the one that's described here. And the issues of representation, the issues of hierarchy, the issues of how do you remove a leader, all of those things are discussed now as people read this Torah portion and say, well, what does it teach us today? What does it teach us right now? I can tell you that in my lifetime, I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen with this portion in a way that very few portions that, have become more hyper relevant. Anyways, when Moses hears this challenge, what does he do? He does the same thing that he did when his brother and sister came against him. When Moses heard this, he fell on his face. Then he spoke to Korach and all his company, saying, come morning, Adonai will make known who is God's and who is holy by granting direct access. The one whom God has chosen will be granted access. So he basically says we're going to have a showdown.
Chain of command is going to be determined.
Do this, and this is the challenge. This is your challenge. It's specified. You, Korach, and your band take fire pans. And fire pan. So what's a fire pan? It is the pan that they would put the incense in, and they would light it, right? So this is the thing that usually the priests, the Levites had, and the Kohanim. So they would put incense on there. Tomorrow, put the fire in them and lay incense on them. So they had like a little kind of kindle, like a little fire starter kind of thing, a piece of wood or some kind of wick that would burn the incense and lay incense on them before Adonai. Then the candidate whom Adonai chooses, and that's the translation that they use here. But again, it's the man that he chooses. I think the note here probably says the participant is the man, right? The ish. He shall be the Holy One. You have gone too far, sons of Levi, Levites. He's telling them, you already had power. Look. Moses said to Korach, further to Korach, hear me, sons of Levi. Is it not enough for you that God of Israel has set you apart from the community of Israel and given you direct access to perform the duties of Adonai's tabernacle and to minister to the community and serve them? Now that God has advanced you and all your fellow Levites with you, do you seek the priesthood too? Truly, it is against Adonai that you and all your company have banded together. For who is Aaron that you should rail against him? Now this, if you want to know what the real secret of this Torah portion is, it's that line back here we just read. But Moses reminds Korach's band, the Levite folk, you already have power. You already have more power than anybody else because you get to work in the tabernacle. That's not enough for you? That you want to have the priesthood too? You want to take away the power from Aaron.
Or didn't they just want to be able to live and get into the land?
Well, it doesn't seem, we don't know. But that's what Moses says. Moses says, you've already been given great power. What do you want, more power? But you're right, because you notice this is could not really be the issue all by itself. And the reason why this might be the secret right here is what really was happening later on, which is, and I've mentioned this to you a few times in passing when it's been relevant. But one of the most important sub stories that's going on all throughout the Torah, and to some extent into the history books of Joshua, Judges, and Samuel, is there's a story within the story. And the story is not a story that you and I pick up on because it's like we don't get it. We don't live through it, but they were living through it. And that is, there was a transfer in religious leadership that went on in Israel. And I've mentioned this to you before, so this will be familiar to you. Originally, the Levites were the priests, not just the sons of Aaron. It was only later on that Aaron and his sons became the priests in charge of the Beit HaMikdash, the temple. Now, it didn't mean there weren't priests before. It didn't mean there weren't people who were descendants of Aaron before. But the power that these priests had became a major issue once Jerusalem was established. It's probably the most important story that no one talks about, because it's the real political issue going on underneath the whole time, which is that the priests who wrote this, the descendants of Aaron who wrote and edited much of the Torah, were telling the Levites, no, you're not in charge, we're in charge. The Kohanim are in charge. You're not in charge anymore. You can't do sacrifices in your backyard. You Levites can't go off into the hillsides and offer up a sacrifice to God. The only sacrifice that's legitimate is offered by us in Jerusalem, and our family's in charge of it. And eventually, of course, that family became pretty large too. But the Levites originally were offering up sacrifices. Any Levite. And to get them to not be able to be legitimate priests anymore was a major issue. And again, we don't talk about it because it happened so long ago, we don't even get it. But it was important. Now, in this scene, Moses is defending the Kohanim. He's defending his brother, and by nature and by extension, his brother's descendants, the people who wrote this. And what he just told the Levites is, you're not in charge. And he was a Levite. Korach was a Levite, but he wasn't a Kohen. He wasn't part of Aaron's family. And so this is the critical line here. Right? Who is Aaron that you should rail against him? So Moses, in a sense, is really not defending himself. He's defending Aaron. And so the Levites are given a kick right here in this portion. So this is really, most importantly, I think, the critical text that makes sure that the Levites are not in charge. They're given power. This text says right here, hasn't God given you Levites power? You want more? You want the priesthood too? Well, why not? There was a time when they were priests. We know it. We read about it in the book of Samuel. Eli, the guy who was the priest who was taking care of Samuel, he was a Levite. They were Levites.
So they say, yes, you're right. We want a little piece of the action too.
What they're really saying is, you can be helpers, but you can't be the ones in charge.
I understand. The power struggle.
Yeah. And that's really the power struggle here. The power struggle here, ironically, is not the one you think it is. There's a switch here that really is the real issue, which is it's not about Moses, it's about Aaron, it's about the Kohanim. And so that's why this is even more, this is the hidden message in here is even more hidden than even the rabbis wanted to talk about, because by the rabbinic period, there was no question that the Kohanim were in charge. They weren't going to argue that. They weren't going to debate it. The Levites were not in power. They did not have that kind of power. So this is the critical thing. Now, there's another group, right? Moses sent for Datan and Abiram, the sons of Eliav, but they said, we will not come. So the Reubenite leaders, so there was two bands within the rebel band. There were the priestly Levite band, And then there were the Reubenite and political ban. There was a religious challenge and there was also a political challenge. Now, these other guys, Datan and Abiram, they're supposed to be part of this face-off. And they say, we're not going to, Moses calls them and they say, we're not going to come. We're not even going to come. We're not even going to respond to you, Moses. Is it not enough that you brought us from a land flowing with milk and honey to have us die in the wilderness, that you would also lord it over us? Egypt. They just called Egypt the land of,
Yes, they did.
exactly. So that is the insanity of where they're coming from. They have the gall to say, Moses, you took us out of a land of milk and honey. You're not bringing us to a land of milk and honey. You took us from a land of milk and honey. Well, it was for the Egyptians. It was a land of milk and honey to the Egyptians. It wasn't for them, but they were there. They could see it. Yeah.
They're wandering,
Uh-huh.
it's hot,
Yeah.
not a lot of water,
Yeah.
not a lot of food.
Yeah. Well,
So you're looking at one misery versus another misery.
yeah, but that's not even what they said, though.
And
What they said is even worse. Because Moses has been talking, God's been telling them they're going to a land flowing with milk and honey. The spies just came back and said it's indeed a land of milk flowing with milk and honey. And these guys just spun it, right? They just flipped it on them, and they know what they said. They never have described Egypt as the land of milk and honey before. They talked about it being a land filled with vegetables and fish and great food. But to say milk and honey, that is not anything other than, you know what, to Moses and to God. And here's where they say, even if you had brought us to a land flowing with milk and honey and give us possession of fields and vineyards, should you gouge out the eyes of those involved, we will not come. And if you look at the note here, it's gouging out the eyes was punishment for runaway slaves and rebellious vassals. So what he's basically saying is, you're punishing us. You're punishing us. So even if we were supposed to go to a land of milk and honey, as you call it, so right here, they know exactly what they're saying. They just said, even if you had brought us to this place, in the land of Canaan, we'd still say, and now you're punishing us? And so here it says pretty clearly, yeah, we have an issue, Moses, with the fact that you've now told us we can't go, that we're going to be punished. And what do they say? Given us possession? God told them what they had to do. They didn't want to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't think they could do it. They didn't have enough faith that they could do it. And now they're turning it on them. As horrible as this is to read, this happens all the time. And this is typical human behavior. And it happens all the time. It happens at work. It happens in families. Well, the worst part is you tell your kid, if you don't do something, you're not going to get this reward, right? We're not going to take you to Disneyland, you know, the land of milk and honey, right? We're not going to take you to Disneyland unless you do this. They don't do it, and you say you're not going. And then the kid turns around and tells you, well, I'm not going to do anything you tell me. You're not taking me to Disneyland. Even if you had taken me to Disneyland. Well, you're not going now, so it's very easy for you to say that. When you had a chance a week ago to do what I told you to do, you could have gone to Disneyland. I mean, there's a stupid version of it, but it is a version of it. It happens all the time to people, where the people turn on you and tell you the thing that you were going to give them. Well, it's easy for you to say that now that you're not going. So that's just what happened to Moses. People just behaved like children. And they disrespected him. They said, we're not even going to come. We don't listen to you anymore. Moses was much aggrieved, and he said to Adonai, pay no regard to their oblation. I have not taken the ass of any one of them, nor have I wronged any one of them. Well, what's interesting about that is Moses is basically saying, God, don't take any offense. And by the way, don't hold me responsible, because I didn't do anything to do this, to make this happen. I haven't done anything. I haven't taken anything from them. And what's interesting about that is that Moses is basically saying here before God, I haven't given him any reason to say that I've abused my leadership. I haven't used my power to take anything from them. I haven't done anything wrong. So Moses seems to have to explain to God that, which, well, if you've ever been on a chain of command, that's what you do. You basically have to tell the person above you, it's not my fault that they're not doing what I told them to do. I gave them the opportunity to do it, and they didn't do it. And I didn't give them any reason for them not to follow me, because you got to cover your butt. That's what Moses just did. He just covered his butt. He says, I haven't done anything wrong. And I don't know what to tell you, God, but I haven't done anything to deserve this. So he says that. That's his moment. Moses's moment of saying this. Again, he seems to have to tell God that. He just did. And Moses said to Korach, tomorrow you and all your company appear before Adonai, you and they and Aaron. Each one of you take a fire pan and lay incense on it, and each of you bring that fire pan before Adonai. 250 fire pans, you and Aaron also bring your fire pans. They each took their fire pan, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and took a place at the entrance of the tent of meeting, as did Moses and Aaron. So, this showdown must have been a pretty dramatic sight. And here's what it says. Korach gathered the whole community against them at the entrance of the tent of meeting. That means everybody came out to see this. The sides get matched up against each other, but everyone else is watching this. The presence of Adonai appeared to the whole community, and Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, stand back from this community that I may annihilate them in an instant. And so God said to Moses and Aaron, everybody is getting blown up now. Everybody. Everybody.
What about negotiation? I'm just saying.
God already told Moses after the spy incident, right? Just the last week, God says, I'm done with these people. Moses, I'll start over. Oh yeah. Stand back. I'm going to annihilate them in an instant. That's what the word is. Kerega. Right now. Remember, Moses already told him, God, you can't do that, because then the Egyptians and everyone else are going to say, you brought us out there to kill him. And there he goes. Moses is interceding on behalf of the people, but they fell on their faces and said, oh God, source of the breath of all flesh, when one member sins, and again, you could say when one man sins, right? When one ish sins, you will be wrathful with the whole community. So they say that to God rhetorically. You're going to hold everyone responsible for one, or well, it's more than one person, but it's 250 people or so. You're going to hold everyone responsible. And by the way, I just want to point out, this is a beautiful name for God. What a beautiful name for God. You're arguing with God on behalf of everybody. And look what they say. God, the source of the breath of all flesh. Uchot l'chol basar. Right? It's a beautiful, beautiful name for God. The source of breath, of energy in all living things. It's a beautiful name for God. It's one of the names for God in the Bible. So it's a nice image to think of when you're kind of praying for healing, when you're thinking about your own body, when you're trying to get up in the morning, thinking about that energy, the ruach, the energy that goes through. We say breath or wind, but it's also energy. The energy of all flesh. What does yours say?
O God, God of the spirits of all mankind.
Yeah, that's nice too. Ruach is sometimes translated as spirit. Yeah, it's breath or spirit. It's also the word for ghost, by the way, in Hebrew, which is why the reason that in some translations, yours doesn't say ghost, yours says spirit, right? King James, Mary?
Spirit.
Yeah, it's the reason why the word Ruach HaKodesh, which means the Holy Spirit, is sometimes translated as the Holy Ghost. Because Ruach can be translated both as ghost or as spirit. But the reality is that the Ruach is also energy or wind or breath. But I love that name for God. So it's kind of planted there in the midst of this argument and this bad scene as we have this beautiful name for God. And again, it's another time where Moses intercedes on behalf of everyone. And it happened several times. It just happened last week. Adonai spoke to Moses saying, speak to the community and say, withdraw from the abodes of Korach, Datan, and Abiram. So God, okay, get the people away though. Get the people away. So you can kind of guess what's going to happen next. So what's so memorable about this scene for us is that this scene, the scene of Korach, is, we really learn more about Korach than Datan and Abiram. Korach is really the center. And by the way, the portion's named after him, named after Korach. He's a bad guy, really bad guy, but we have the portion named after him. What's memorable about this scene is that it's in the movie The Ten Commandments. Charlton Heston Ten Commandments. Say the Charlton Heston, the DeMille Ten Commandments, the 1954-56 version of the movie. Edward G. Robinson plays Dathan. They call him Dathan. He's really a composite of Korach and Datan and Abiram. It's interesting that they used Dathan or Datan. I always get some Dathan. They didn't call him Dathan, but that's the biblical, that's the whatever, the translation, the transliteration comes out as Dathan. But Datan is the guy. And in the movie, what's interesting about Datan is that he's bad from all the way. We see him all the way from the beginning. We see him all the way back in Egypt. And what DeMille did is he followed the midrash that Datan is that guy, or Korach is that guy who's always been a problem. He represents that, but in the midrash, he is that guy, because the midrash doesn't like some guy just popping out of nowhere. They want Korach to be there all the time. So if you recall in the movie, Edward G. Robinson is the guy who back in Egypt was an overseer, was a taskmaster for the Egyptians. He was a capo, and he works for the Egyptians, and he has power back there. And he doesn't like losing his power. He doesn't want to lose his power. He's powerful back then, and he doesn't like losing his power. If you recall, there's that whole sub-story with Joshua, played by John Derrick. And he falls in love with Datan's slave girl, and he ends up saving Datan by painting blood on his doorpost. And he saves the slave girl. He, by extension, ends up saving Datan, who didn't want the blood on his door, who didn't want to follow the Jews, but he, of course, does. And he's taken out of Egypt. And he's been a problem ever since. And he's the one who gets everybody all riled up at the Mount Sinai scene, right? And he gets everyone all riled up. It is famous. Where's your Messiah now? Where's your Messiah now? Where's your Moses now? in that accent. Where's your Moses now? So the Edward G. Robinson character, because it's so not biblical. Everyone else has has some kind of, somewhat biblical state. He's got this New York, where's the Messiah? Interestingly about that dude too, he's the only Jewish guy in the movie. He's the only Jewish guy. Everyone else is Christian, is not Jewish. I mean, they're all great actors and stuff, but they're none of them are Jewish, except for him. Well, I thought it was always ironic that the villain is the one played by the Jew. But anyways, he's always been a problem. So we don't really know much about him in the Torah, but the Midrash, DeMille drew on all the Midrash from that. It was a very Midrashic movie, that movie. It's got a lot of Jewish sources, Midrashic sources, but this is the final showdown. And this is where Korach is finally going to get his comeuppance. So Moses rose and went to Datan and Abiram, the elders of Israel, following him. He addressed the community saying, "Move away from the tents of these wicked men and touch nothing that belongs to them, lest you be wiped out for all their sins." So they withdrew from the abodes of Korach, Datan, and Abiram. Now Datan and Abiram had come out, and they stood at the entrance of their tents with their wives, their adult children, and their little ones. And Moses said, "By this you shall know that it was Adonai who sent me to do all these things, that they are not of my own devising. If these people's death is that of all humankind, if their lot is humankind's common fate, it was not Adonai who sent me. But if Adonai brings about something unheard of, so that the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, you shall know that those involved have spurned Adonai. And there is the challenge. And scarcely had he finished speaking all these words when the ground under them burst asunder, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households, all Korach's people and all their possessions. And they went down alive into Sheol with all that belonged to them. The earth closed over them, and they vanished from the midst of the congregation. And all Israel around them fled at their shrieks, for they said, the earth will swallow us. Now, this is one of the most dramatic scenes in the Bible. The earth literally opens up only underneath these guys and swallows them up.
And their family.
And they go down, and their families. But look, bad translation here, by the way. I almost want to stop here. This is for all Korach's people, right? So, Glory, what does your translation say for verse 32?
And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them with their households and all Korah's men and all their possessions.
Okay. And what does yours say, Mary?
The earth opened up its mouth, swallowed them up, and their houses and all the men that appertained unto Korah and all their goods.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting about what happens to their households is that assumedly it says that this was, and I don't want to belabor this point, but there's a very interesting thing that happens here. It says that Datan and Abiram had come out and stood at the entrance with their wives and adult children. That means the kids got swallowed up too. Yeah. But what's interesting is it doesn't say that Korach's kids got swallowed up.
My note says,
What does it say?
the sons of.
Oh, wait here. So because Glory's got a good translation with footnotes.
The sons of Korah did not die. Apparently, they did not join their father in his rash plan. The households of the other rebels died with them.
Yep. And so that translation is a good that note is an important note because it does follow this very important tradition we have that Korach's sons and family did not join him. They did not follow their father, which shows us that there can be and kids don't have to follow their parents over the cliff, so to speak, or into the earth. Now, the imagination of the rabbis on this, and I guess our own imagination, I just read the story with our kids, by the way, our Hebrew school kids. I always read this with them. One of the most amazing parts of the Torah, right? And actually, by the way, just so you know, this is the section that our young people are going to be reading in Israel in June. On June 20 something, when they're reading in the Torah at their B'nai Mitzvah at the Kotel, our kids from our temple, they're going to read this section. They're going to read this section. Which means that, again, they got a great place to think about. They got some great things here to think about. But for kids, adults, people throughout history, throughout the ages, and again, to some extent, even for Gentile readers who are reading this, whoa, this idea of the people getting swallowed up and shrieking, you can hear their voices as they're going into the earth, that's pretty dramatic. That's pretty graphic. That's pretty horrific. That's some horror. And so the rabbis actually, what?
These people were any better than the Egyptians
Who?
with the Israelites?
Well, definitely some of
Were
them.
they any better than the Egyptians?
Definitely some of them are.
Just as cruel.
Definitely some of them were not very much better. Yeah. What's interesting is that the rabbis imagine that those people, Korach and his band, are still there. They never die. That there's a place that you can go into the desert and still hear these cries.
Oh,
That the cries are still going on, that the punishment is still there for them.
Whenever I drive,
The cries of the people in the desert. Now, why, Glory? The note does not say why we know Korach's family is not dead. And I'll show you why. Why?
It it does give me a future verse.
What does it say? What's the future verse does it say?
26.
11.
Yes.
Well, there's even a bigger issue right here. Look at our Psalms. We have Psalms, and sometimes it says a Psalm of David, and sometimes it says a Psalm of the way it was supposed to be played. This one says Lam Natseach for the leader, a maskil, which is a form of a psalm, Livnei Korach. You can see that there's a, and it's not one. Here's Psalm 44, another psalm that says of the Korachites. The Korachites were singing songs in the temple. Not only were they still around, they were still singing them. And here's a Shoshanim, which might have been, by the way, a type of instrument. We're not sure. A maskil is a kind of a song, not a song. This is a love song. Not all of them, not all by David either, right? Or Aaron, or sometimes it would say. Here's another one. All this section, 44 through 49, are all songs of the Korachites. It's a whole section. And again, it's not just that they're Livnei of Korach, right? It'll also tell us it's an alamot. That's a different type of song. So the Psalms will actually tell us at the beginning sometimes what they were. We don't know that. That's why it says right here, uncertain. We don't know. Maybe maskil was the way it was supposed to be played, the tempo. Maybe it was the kind of instruments it was supposed to be played at. We don't know, but the directions are there, and also the descriptions. Who wrote them is sometimes right there. So there we have a fact that Korach and his family, or at least his legacy, wasn't all bad, because some of his family turned out to be Levites that we still sing their songs. So they didn't go away. What's interesting again is that sometimes people follow their parents over the cliff, and sometimes they don't.
Well, we know that they all did that because some of us are Korach, but Levites.
I guess so. But we don't know who are Korahites anymore.
Yeah.
You're a Korahite? I believe it. He's always rebellious. He's especially rebellious during the playoffs. When he says, where's your Kershaw now? That's what he says. Well, that's not the end here. And the fire went forth from Adonai and it consumed the 250 contestants, the other guys, offering the incense. So some got swallowed up and some got burnt up. So that is the way the Korach rebellion ends. And again, this is not the end of the problems that Moses has with the people, but it is with these particular people. You'd think that would have sent a message to everybody. It's time to start behaving. It's time to start getting in line. But it didn't. So what happens when you see somebody screw up and get punished? Sometimes you say, I don't want that to happen to me. And then sometimes people say, that ain't gonna happen to me. And that seems to be what these people said. That somehow is not gonna happen to them. What do? Do the people, what happens? Now, again, the justifications or the rationalizations and all the other things that go into this, of course, the people just found out they're not coming into the land. Of course, they're upset. Of course, they're bent out of shape.
They don't really have faith.
Of course, they don't have faith. And
It's because they're hungry and thirsty.
well, they have water and they have manna. They're not happy with it. You're right. They're not happy with it, but you saw what happened last time they complained. They ate quail and they got sick. They had so much meat that they got sick coming out of their nose. So you got to think that the people are a little messed up.
They'll wait for when they need water.
And I guess the argument is it's not going to get better. It can't get better because they're not going to change.
Right.
So
Actually, if you really think about it, they got Moses in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, why?
we haven't gotten to it yet.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Don't give away the story.
I know. Listen.
Well,
Amy, I can tell. I can read ahead to you.
he's read the Torah before, man. He's told them, he's read it before. Well, for right now, pretend like you don't know.
I don't know. Mike,
So
we need to banish Mike outside.
he needs to burn. He needs to burn. No, the answer is we're gonna read, we're gonna read what happens eventually with them, but he is right. But to some extent, they've gotten Moses into trouble anyways, because Moses doesn't want this. Moses has already said, I don't need this. Let somebody else do this. I can't do it anymore.
How many times did he say that?
Yeah, well, he just said it again, couple chapters ago. Moses said, and that's when God said, let the Spirit be on other people. So even that doesn't fix the problem though, because the people are going to continuously, they're gonna go back to that, the default.
God wanted to get rid of all these people and start over again, and Moses said no. Did he say that?
Yeah, he just said it. So
He's tough. So he's not all bad, you know.
who's not bad?
Moses is not bad. He complains, but.
But he is the leader who, he's the leader who you can't win.
The thankless job.
It's a thankless job and it's an unwinnable situation. He can't possibly win with it.
But he could have if he let God get rid of it. We'll start over again.
Of course, but then he failed. You see, because then he wasn't able to keep the people alive. So to some extent, he's keeping the people alive from the head boss. So the boss says, I'm going to fire everybody, start over with another division. Right? That's the equivalent in the company, right? I'm going to fire everybody and then I'll give you a whole nother team to work with. And Moses, to some extent, says, well, if that happens to me, then I failed. I failed as a leader. I couldn't fix this.
There's something I don't understand here.
What?
Who said get rid of all the people?
God says, I'm going to get rid of them. God said, I will. Yeah, God said, I'm going to destroy. He just said it. He just told Moses, I'm going to destroy everybody. And then Moses just said, no, can't do that.
You have to forgive me, but that sounds a lot like Hitler. Let's cleanse him.
Well, God definitely says to people, it says to Moses a few times, I'm going to destroy the people. I'm going to start over with you. And what is God really wanting Moses to do? Which is to some extent stand up and be a good leader and say, I'm not going to let my people go.
Just that thought is.
I understand, but does God knows what Moses, I mean, the argument would be God knows what Moses is going to do. If God, but see, here's the thing. So if God, it's a good point. So if first of all, we know what the answer is, which is Moses, like everyone knew what the answer was. The people are going to get to the promised land, but it's touch and go the whole way. But the answer is that if Moses would have ever said, fine, start over, then he's not the leader that he was supposed to be in the first place. So to some extent, it's a test a little bit on whether Moses is going to intercede before the people.
I'm not talking about God or Moses. I'm talking about that at that point, people were already talking about
Wiping out a whole people?
or a certain group of people.
Yeah, but here's God. That's the irony of it, is God saying, I'm going to wipe out my own people.
You know what I think? I think this is God's first experience with human beings.
Well, there's people who've said that.
Yeah.
There's people who've said that this is God.
I did other universes everywhere, different species, and they didn't actually.
There's people who
Human
said,
beings, I'm done.
there's people who've said that this is God. What do we learn about God in this? Is God learning? Does God learn how to deal with us? Because here's our challenge is that, we've made this comparison before, that to some extent the Torah gives us the different stages of life, what Erickson called the 5 stages of life. The first stage of life is Genesis, is the first book to some extent, which is childhood. And then we move into adolescence, and then we move into adulthood, and then we move into this later stages of life where, well, they're called different things by different people, but Erickson was the one who kind of postulated that there's 5 different stages of life. And that it doesn't exactly go to the 5 books, but some, I could say you could almost do it. But right now the people are teenagers, right? And right now the people are trying to figure out what are the boundaries and what are the limits that I push God to. And how do I have freedom, but at the same time have responsibility? So right now in this book, the people are still, they're still teenagers. Yeah. The problem is that by the time they actually grow up, it's going to be a whole nother generation, but it's not until that time. So it doesn't fit exactly. It's not like one book for each stage of Erickson's development of, I'm not, you've heard of Erickson's theory, right? I'm not making this up. You've taught that before, haven't you, Joyce?
Yes.
But this dude right here, here's the guy right here. Let me put him up here for everybody to see. He's important, a very important psychologist. Here, I'll put him up here. So he, despite lacking a university degree, Erickson served as a professor at prominent institutions, including Harvard and Berkeley and Yale. So some people, again, I guess this 2002 ranked him as the 12th most eminent psychologist of the 20th century. So you can see, came from a Jewish upbringing. And let me see if I can find his theories of development. Emerging adulthood. In Erickson's discussion of development, in fact, he referred to as prolonged adolescence and emerging adulthood. So, yeah, he was a genius, let's put it this way. And yeah, some of his ideas have become, I would just say, kind of accepted. They're not even theories anymore. People just use them and talk about them as if they are. He won a Pulitzer Prize. So, yeah, and so again, show you right here. Erickson's theory of development includes various psychosocial crises, where each conflict builds off the previous stages. The results of each conflict can have a negative or positive impact on a person's development. And so, you know, I would say, again, if you want to read more about him, here's his different stages. These are the 8 stages. This is when he divided up into 8 stages. But some people throw the first 3, or was it 4? I think the first 4 are through childhood, and then adolescence, early adulthood, middle adulthood, and late adulthood. So a lot of people kind of divide it up where the first 4 are part of the childhood, and then it's adolescence, early adulthood, middlehood, and late adulthood. So you know, this is the age right here where the people are kind of in the numbers situation where they're figuring out who am I, who can I be, and the events are social relationships. Well, this one is definitely a social relationship, and again, this could be considered the end of this period of adolescence. So again, I don't exactly say it follows the Torah's 5 books, but the Genesis chapters are kind of the childhood, and then adolescence is kind of Exodus through this period here. And yeah, I thought about writing about this before, but again, no one will read it, so I'm not going to spend time writing it. But anyways, but he was. You've read Erickson before, haven't you, Margaret? If you've read Erickson, right? If you've read Erickson before,
of course. And he was more of an educator than a philosopher.
No, but his power, his legacy is definitely still felt by people. So anyways, people want to read more about it. As you go through these stages, well, most people here have been through a lot of the stages already. So you can look back and see whether you feel that as you emerge into these later stages, you can see, oh yeah, that makes sense. I kind of feel that way.
Are still stuck. Still stuck in early childhood.
Some people are. No, but it is actually important to think about this, actually, to think about the stages, because, we're on these, like, the kind of point about it that I always thought was funny is like, it's true whether you want to admit it or
Right.
not. It's not really, that's why I'm saying, it's like, people don't really argue. I mean, you can't argue about whether he's right or not, but it's kind of like, well, maybe you can argue maybe over some of it, but the idea of talking about these kinds of things, and he was one of the first to talk about it, which is, yeah, people go through stages of life. And just doing that was already a major thing. So let's take a look at chapter 17, which is what happens after. What happens after this scene, this dramatic scene? Well, Adonai spoke to Moses saying, order Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, to remove the fire pans, for they become sacred from among the charred remains, and scattered the coals abroad. Remove the fire pans of those who have sinned at the cost of their lives, and let them be made into hammered sheets as plating for the altar, where they have been used for offering to Adonai, and they have become sacred, and let them serve as a warning to the people of Israel.
Yeah, but that's sounding like human sacrifice.
Well, it's not human sacrifice because they didn't use it at the people, but they used their fire pans, which is an interesting idea, which is the fire pans have now become holy. They've now been touched by God's fire, so you can't throw them away. Well, what do we do with them? We can't use them as fire pans anymore, because that would be like, who wants to hold the fire pan of some guy who was bad? I don't want to use a fire pan from the bad guys, but we're still going to use them. We have to use them. And so instead, they are hammered out. They're hammered out, and they're used as Eleazar took the priest, the priest took the copper fire pans, which had been used for offering, and they were hammered into plating for the altar, as Adonai had ordered him through Moses. It was to be a reminder to the Israelites so that no outsider, one not of Aaron's offspring, should presume to offer incense before Adonai and suffer the fate of Korach and his band. And so what do? You take it and you still use it for a holy purpose. You're not going to use it as exactly what it was done in the first place, but we're still going to be using it for the tabernacle.
Well, wait a minute, they were told to bring the fire pan.
Mhm.
It was a setup.
Well, it was a setup from the standpoint of, exactly, these were going to be the way we're going to see how this is all going to go down, but they were still touched by God's power. And so they have holiness to them. And so instead, what they're going to be is a reminder of God's power. And they're going to be a reminder specifically to the Levites. Don't get out of order. Don't do what Korach and his family did and his band. You don't want to wind up like Korach, Levites. So it's a reminder that anyone who's not Aaron's descendants better not get out of line. And it's another reminder that the Levites were no longer supposed to be doing this, or they were not supposed to be doing this.
Bringing the fire pans, their fate was already determined.
Yes.
Well, they didn't know that.
No, they didn't know that.
Now you're saying it's a setup, right? It is a setup from the standpoint of they're being given a challenge.
Yeah, and then
And
they
God knew what he was doing.
and be made an example of.
Yep. And he's made an example of him in front of everybody. And of course, now we have this story. It's a cautionary story. And it says that it's a reminder. That's what it says. It's a reminder that you remember what happens. Zikaron, the word that we use for remembrance. It's a zikaron. It's a remembrance.
Root of Yisro.
A root
Mine
of
is
store.
different.
What does it say?
This is 17.
Yeah.
Okay, the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Israelites and get 12 staffs from them, one from the leader of each of their ancestral tribes. Write the name of each man on his staff.
You're in a different chapter.
17, no, ours divides separately.
Yeah.
We aren't to 17.
You missed what I said. right?
No, she missed what you said.
Yeah. that's what I said.
I knew what you-
Marry up to him.
You have a
You
different,
decided to
the
go
chapters,
the wrong way.
the chapters and verses are
You gave me
different.
authority to do that.
Chapters and
There we
verses
go.
are different. It's chapters and verses are different. Mary, what does yours have? What line are we in?
40.
Yeah. So you're still in 16.
Oh,
You're in 16 still. You're not missing anything. You just skipped over those verses because you're still in chapter 16. Yeah, John.
Mine has, some commentary.
Yep.
So I've been reading it. This is, I bet you, this, because this is pretty important back then, I think. He said, over the years, the Korach story assumed great importance. Rabbis of the Mishnah and Talmud times viewed themselves as direct spiritual descendants of Moses. And they interpreted the punishment of Korach as a warning to their own contemporaries who challenged the divine sanctity of
Mhm.
the rabbinic teaching. We discussed that. However, since, and I'll make this brief, since a repetition of biblical miracles could not be counted on, the rabbis threatened their challengers, right, with eternal damnation.
Yep.
That's pretty interesting. For instance, when they declared that those who did not believe in resurrection would have no share in the world to come.
Uh-huh.
It is in this light that we must see the assertion of Rabbi Akiva. And I went back because I didn't know when he lived. He lived 50 AD, long ago, right? So
135. 135.
Right. Who am I to challenge you?
No, it's,
Right?
we talked about Rabbi Akiva. He's the one who has his skin pulled from his body by the Romans.
That Korah was not only punished in the desert, but excluded from divine grace for all time. to come.
Yeah. So
That's
Korach,
pretty important. Back
Korach,
then, people were
okay,
thinking,
so we're gonna get, we will get to that. Well, we'll get to it now. No, we'll get to it right now. No, we'll get to it right now. We're just gonna kind of save this, but no, this is a good one because Korach is the archetype of a rebel, right? Somebody who denies things. Now, look, the rabbi said, if you deny the world to come, you're denied a place in the world to come. Okay, well, that kind of makes sense. If you don't believe it, you don't get it. Look, the Sadducees, the priests, the descendants of the priests, the descendants of Aaron, essentially, ironically, were the ones who taught there is no world to come. And so the Pharisees, the people who become the rabbis, were still dealing with those people and saying, what do you mean there's no world to come? If there's no world to come, then where's the justice? Where's the payout for people who are suffering? They believe the rabbis taught that there is a world to come. Now you could say to yourself, well, of course there's a heaven. Everyone knows there's a heaven. You only say that because you lived 2,000 years later, and the rabbis have been teaching that for 2,000 years. If you only read the Torah, it would be very hard for you to understand that there's a heaven because it doesn't say heaven anywhere here. Anywhere where you see the word heaven in translation, it's the word Shemayim, which essentially means above us, the skies, the air, the atmosphere. There is no description of heaven in the Torah. It's not there. So the rabbis had some difficulty in convincing people of this because the Sadducees would turn around and other people would say, show me, where is it? Where is it in the Torah?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
in my
Oh.
translation, I'm reading on my Kindle, in my translation, there is a underworld, Sheol, S-H-E-O-L.
Sheol. Yes, and I was just about to say that. Sheol is the word that we just read before, right? It's right here. They went down alive into Sheol, which we usually translate as the word for netherworld. So what did the Sadducees, what did those people think Sheol was? The only thing that they could say is it's underground. It's some place where if people did have an existence afterwards, it's not a place that you necessarily want to be at. It's not heaven. It's not even clear that it's not clear that it's even a place where you exist at all once you're down there. A place of nothingness, essentially darkness. The only reference we have of anyone coming out of Sheol is the spirit of Samuel in the book of Samuel, when Saul has the witch call his spirit up. That's the only place where you can say at all in the Bible that there's any spirit or any ghost that happens after you die. But it's clear that it's there. So how did people rectify that? How would they say that there is something? And people would say, yeah, but that's not a heaven. It's not necessarily anything even that you wouldn't necessarily want to exist in.
Could it be more like the Greek underworld?
Probably. And the idea of resurrection that the rabbis were talking about, which of course Christianity also built on, was the idea that at some point you get a physical body back. That's where some people really had an issue. Because they said, where does it say in the Bible that there is a physical resurrection of your body? And then people said, well, what about the story of Ezekiel, the Valley of the Dry Bones, which we're about to read, by the way, in our Tuesday morning class. We're going to read it in a few weeks. We're reading Ezekiel and we'll see the story. It's pretty clear that Ezekiel has a vision of the Valley of the Dry Bones, and it doesn't necessarily apply to everyone who's ever lived ever. And it seems to be a metaphor or a symbol for the restoration of Israel, that Israel is going to come back to life. Not that a person necessarily comes back to life, but it's led to the idea that there is a line in the Bible, or there's a passage which says that someone is resurrected in a physical body. This was a major issue for people because it got to the extent, and it still plays out. People say if you're resurrected in a physical body, then you better be buried in your physical body, and you better not be cremated. Because if you're going to be cremated, you're going to have no body to come back to. If you get your body chopped up, you have your head placed one place and your bones placed another place, your body's not going to be able to come back together.
Is that why when there were blow-ups in Israel, they collected all the
Yep.
pieces of the body?
They make sure they have all the body so that all the bones work.
It's true, but the story is when grandma, some limb amputated.
Well, wait a second.
Yes, they would bury your limb back with you when you were resurrected. And look, the ossuaries that we discovered from this period of time when Jews started to believe this physical resurrection is that they would create bone boxes where they would put everyone's bones together after their bodies decomposed. They would go into their tombs, their family crypts, and after about a year and a half, they would take those bones together and they would put them into a box, and they would put the little compact box back onto the shelf. And they had
we should not be organ donors, right?
What?
We should not be organ donors.
And that was the argument, was that you could not desecrate a body and give an organ. Now, here's the counter argument to that, Philip. Clearly, the flesh gets put back on the body. As long as you're not giving a bone, it's not a problem. If you gave your heart, if you gave your lungs, but the bones, that your flesh comes back, well, it comes from this. They clearly saw when they reassembled the bones back that there was no flesh on them.
Oh.
So if God can reassemble the bones, which is what happens in Ezekiel, in the Valley of the Dry Bones vision, is it says that the bones get reassembled. We're not going to look at it because we're going to look at it soon and it takes us way off tangent. But if you look at Ezekiel's vision, it says that the bones come back, they assemble them, God assembles them, and then God puts flesh back on the bones.
Oh.
And then we sing a song called Dem Bones, Dem Dry Bones. That's where the song comes from. The spiritual comes from Ezekiel. That's where it comes from, because it comes from Ezekiel's vision. But it's very hard to get from that then we have physical resurrection. And so the idea, though, is still important because it does play out into this question of organ donation. But the rabbis did have this idea that if you weren't buried whole, that your body would not be able to be resurrected back together. So it was important to have that. Look, again, these ideas played out later on where, again, to some extent, the rabbi said, if you deny this, if you deny these principles, then you're denying God, and you're essentially, again, if you don't believe in God, you don't get resurrected. You don't get to come back. There's a real question about, again, well, then what happens to you? Yes.
I'm not sure where I got the sense that if we're Jewish, if we pray to God and we go to heaven, we can go
through praying directly to God.
Yeah,
But if you're Christian, you can only go through Jesus to get into heaven because God won't listen to you. Only pray to Jesus and Jesus can get you into heaven.
I'd rather not answer that question because I can't speak on behalf of, I can only speak on behalf of myself. I know that there's people who teach that, but there's also people who don't teach that. So I don't want to say that is 100% again, what every person who is Christian believes that.
Church, I was taught, if you don't believe in resurrection of Jesus, you will not be resurrected.
That's right.
Okay, so that's a twist on what the Jews taught, which is if you don't believe in resurrection, you're not going to get resurrected. So rabbis were teaching that thousands of years ago, that you have to believe in resurrection, you have to believe in the oneness of God, you have to believe in that God created everything, that there is no other God. All of these principles of faith were important that you had to have. And including, by the way, we have Maimonides' version of those midot, those 13 principles, which we've talked about before. One of his famous ones are that you believe in the Messiah, that you believe in the Messianic era or the Messiah. So that was considered a principle of faith, at least the way Maimonides laid it out. Korach does represent, as John said, the archetype of the person who is denying God or is denying God's leadership or is God, is denying and rebelling against the tradition. And so Korach became that archetype. And so he is considered to be a horrible example of what you're supposed to do. Now, he's Jewish. No question he's Jewish. He's a Levite. And so, John, the issue for us is that Korach is one of our own. He's bad, but he's one of our own. Now,
is he bad because he challenged leadership?
He's bad because he seems to he should have known better. He was given power, wasn't enough for him, and he challenged Moses. And by extension, he challenged God. And so he's punished. So he's the bad guy, but yet the portion's named after him. Well, that's interesting. Bad guy, but he's still one of our own. Now, what's interesting is that we also have an example of someone who's really good, who has a portion named after them, her. And she's one of our own. And her name is Sarah, Chaye Sarah. So there's a portion named after her. Then we have a guy who's kind of in the middle, and we're going to read about him in a couple of weeks. He's the other descendant of Aaron that we read about a lot, his grandson, Pinchas. And he's named after him. Yeah, Pinchas. Pinchas. So is my father. So Pinchas. So if you have a good person, Sarah, you have an in-between person, Pinchas, and you have kind of a schnook right here, Korach. You have a good person, an in-between person, and a bad person. Now, there's only 6 portions named after people. Interestingly, 1, 2, and 3 are Jewish. And then guess what? There's 1, 2, and 3 who are Gentile that have portions named after them. The 3 Gentiles, you want to know the really bad one first? We're going to read him soon. His name is Balak. Balak. We're going to read about him in a couple weeks. He's a bad king who hires Balaam to curse us. He's a bad Gentile. And then we have a kind of an in-between Gentile. He's good, but he's also got some weaknesses. He's our ancestor. His name is Noah. It's the second portion of the Bible. We have Noah. He's an in-between guy. And then we have a really good Gentile, and we read about him a few months ago. His name is Yitro. The portion we read the 10 Commandments, and he's the really good Gentile. And so we have a portion named after him. The rabbis like to point out, we have 6 portions that are named after people. And what do we learn about them? 3 of them are Gentile, 3 of them are Jewish.
Noah wasn't Jewish.
No, he's everything. He's our ancestor. He wasn't Jewish yet, because Abraham is the first Jew. And he's 10 generations before. Some people would say he's kind of in the line of Jews, but he's our ancestor, but he's not Jewish. Adam wasn't Jewish. Abraham was the first Jew. So he's not Jewish. So you're right. Yeah, he's kind of like he's our ancestor, but he's not. So the rabbis pointed out, and this is a little midrash, a little explanation. You have a good person, a bad person, and an in-between person on both, which teaches us Jews and Gentiles, you find good ones, bad ones, and a lot of in-betweens. So don't say that all the goods are on the Jewish side. Don't say all the bads are on the Gentile side. Don't say that there's not anyone. They said you can find them on all sides. And so they taught this little midrash of these 6 names. And a critical one here is Korach. What's interesting is we're still going to read about, we've only read about 4, we have 2 more. We have Balak and Pinchas still coming up. So a couple of them are in Genesis, one of them's in Exodus, and then the rest are in the other 3 are in Numbers. We just read one of them. So Korach is our bad one. He's our bad example. So yes, to answer and to build off what John said, there are examples of people who never get to go to heaven. He's one of them. Korach and his band, and it's not just Korach, but it's all the people that do this. They don't get, there's damnation for them. Now, people don't like that because, in our tradition, everybody eventually gets to heaven, not these guys. So there's certain people that the Talmud says do really bad things, they're still getting punished. Him and his band are not only still getting punished in hell, they're still underground,
And
screaming.
apparently they can't be forgiven that they don't qualify for that.
Yeah. So there's this kind of sadness to this because everyone should be redeemable. But there are the irredeemables that are examples of irredeemables, people who do really bad stuff. So this is where people have a problem because they don't like the idea that nobody's beyond redemption. But the interesting thing is we would say, at least today, well, there might be examples of people who are irredeemable. We could think about some of them today, but for the most part, everyone else is. There's very extreme examples. But for almost everybody else, their redemption. At some point, they get out of hell. They might have to spend a little time there. We actually teach that nobody is ever down there for more than a year.
Which is why we only say Kaddish for 11 months.
Yeah. So when you say Kaddish for somebody,
yes.
yes. So no one has to say Kaddish for the full year for their family, for their parents. You don't have to say Kaddish necessarily for other relatives. You can for your uncles or aunts, you can for a cousin, but the people you're supposed to say Kaddish for every day are your parents, your siblings, your children, God forbid, your spouse. Those are the people you have to say Kaddish for a whole year, but you don't say it for the full year because you'd only have to say it for a full year. They were really, really bad.
You better say it for me, you better say.
So you do 11 months. No, but we don't know. We don't know. We don't know. But to err on the side of good judgment, we only do it for 11 months. But that's the tradition of why we don't do an unveiling, or we stop saying Kaddish after the 11th month, or not into the 12th month. You don't have to go for the full year because we don't want to assume that any of your relatives are so bad that you have to say Kaddish for them. Why? Because the tradition is that you say Kaddish for them, you elevate them. They feel.
What's that book that I think you have too that has the levels.
Yeah. But we not only elevate them, but when we say Kaddish for them, we ease their purgatory experience. That's nice, though. It means there's something we can do for the people that we love to help them, to remember them in love. The Jewish views of the afterlife.
Yeah. You get into that.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you go into heaven. So there is redemption, or there's purgatory is not a long sentence. That's good to know. But again, you have to have, everybody has some refining that goes on, because everybody has stuff that they've taken in from this world that they have to leave behind. They have to get that refined off of them. So everyone needs a little bit of purgatory. Some people need more than others. Why are you looking at me like that, Sheldon? No, Sheldon's looking at me like he knows how much time I have. I'm a little worried, Sheldon.
I have something private to discuss.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because I think he might know. I don't want to hear that it's worse than I thought.
I'll give you, I'll say Kaddish for you.
Thank you. Oh, for 12 months. Oh my God, that's horrible, Sheldon. That's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear I only had to have a month. Oh, no. Yes.
They told me that there was one volcano
Uh-huh.
which was part of hell.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And Yeah, and if you stepped in front of the volcano, not too close, but still in front of it, you could hear the souls or the torture
Screams. Yeah.
screams. And so, of course, I had to go there. You know. Yes. But I was scared to death because I did hear.
You heard screaming?
sounds.
You heard screaming?
I heard, we were in the German part of Switzerland, so of course, the souls were all German, you know? Or Swiss, German.
Well, you were in Iceland though.
Yes, when was I?
You said you were in Iceland when you heard the volcano.
I was in Iceland.
Yeah,
and I heard
okay.
the voices
You heard the
from
voice.
volcano
Yeah.
screaming,
Yeah.
help, help. And, ooh, it was the wind.
That's pretty scary.
It was scary.
So,
It was cold too. I was-
so we're gonna read the next section.
Okay.
We're gonna read the next section. We're gonna read the next section next week, but this is, yeah, for those that are reading in 17, we're in person next week. On Wednesday. Not on Tuesday, we're online Tuesday. So we're gonna read chapter 17 next week. We read a little bit of 17 this time, but we'll read it. But yeah, there's a lot in this portion, but I'm glad, the most important thing tonight that I wanted to leave you with is that that midrash that, you know, Korach was bad, but there's bad people in our community and there's bad people in other community and there's good people and in between people. And we've been teaching that for a long time. So Korach reminds us that there are people in our community who are pretty bad. And the ones who are really bad are people who've been given responsibilities and who've been given leadership who wind up doing really bad things.
Mhm.
There's even a rabbi who had his wife killed, which, believe it or not, they just turned it into a musical. How do you turn that story into a musical? I'm not making it up. It happened in
Rabbi?
Yeah, it happened.
I
in
saw
Cherry Hill, New
that.
Jersey.
I saw
Yeah, you
that
saw it.
musical. It's called A Wicked Soul in Cherry Hill. It was at the Geffen for quite a while.
See,
And
I'm
it's
not
really
making-
first class. His name was Fred Newlander.
Yeah. Yeah,
And it's a terrific play.
you saw it?
Yes,
That's Captain.
it was at the
No, but
Geffen,
it was,
I
it
think.
was not a play, it was a musical.
Yeah, it was a musical at the Geffen
Here
Playhouse in
it
Westwood.
was. Here it was last year. I never saw
Yeah.
it.
It was terrific.
You think I was making it up? I'm not making it up. They made it. No, I might exaggerate. I mean, it's the rabbinic thing, but yeah, this was a true story. And now they've turned it into, he's still alive, Fred Newlander, by the way. I think, I looked it up recently. Yeah, he's still alive. Yeah, he went to jail. He hired, kind of had somebody kill his wife. It was a really bad story. Yeah, and turned it into a musical. I did hear it was not bad, but yeah, I was surprised that they had turned it into a musical. But yeah,
No, he hired someone to kill his wife because he wanted to marry another woman and he didn't want to get a divorce.
yeah, I know. Yeah, it was a bad story. It was a bad story. And the woman's still alive too. She was a radio hostess. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I'm not making it up. I can't make up something as crazy as that. But anyways, the story itself was a really bad story. But now they've turned it into a musical. So I'm glad you went to see it. I'm glad you went to see it. And they invited me to see it, but I don't know. The story is so upsetting that I didn't want to. I guess I did read about it, and I read there was a book about it. And I read it, but I don't know. There's part of me that I don't want to think about it.
That's too bad. It was really well done.
I know. I hear you. Okay, Elise. I don't want to get any ideas. Okay, that's the main thing is. I'm going to admit it. I really don't want to get any ideas. No, I'm telling you. All we do is exactly, Joyce. 3 nights a week, my wife and I are watching Dateline going, don't ever do that to me. Don't ever do that to me. It's like, how many times have we seen these stories and you're like, oh my gosh, why do I have another wife killing a husband? Please. So, yeah, I know it's unfortunate that there's even a rabbinic version of this story. Yep, yep.
It used to be a news program.
What?
Dateline.
No, that's what I'm saying. And it's, no, it's still on.
Like, now they do murders.
You know, it's all, no, it's all crime, true crime stuff.
Yeah.
Anyways, folks, on a happier note, we'll see you Friday night. We'll have services with Wendy here, and we also have a picnic on Sunday at the park at Meadows. And then we also have coming up, we're working on it right now, on our date for Shavuot, which will be coming up at the end of the Omer period, which is coming up in about 3 weeks. It's at CBS this year. It's going to be the night of the 25th. It's 3 weeks from tomorrow. Oh my gosh, the Omer period is over. Where did the time go? Where's our Omer period? Really? It's your father's yahrzeit. There you go. You can remember it. Shavuot. All right, folks. Well, we will see you Friday or Sunday or next week, but we will be in person. Yes.
I'm going in July.
We are working on the date. They have not gotten back to me. Thank you for reminding me. I'll call them tomorrow. But they were supposed to give us the opportunity, a few different dates. But somebody else went and told me they really thought it was important.
My cousin, he's the editor. Well, it can't work now anyway, so.
Yeah, I'm asking for a few dates because I'm trying to get the curator, one of the curators of the exhibit, Michael Berenbaum, to come over and meet us that day and talk to us about why they selected what they selected to be part of the Auschwitz. And you were there, We'll go back to Auschwitz at some point, and it's a very hard journey to make emotionally. You don't think it's a real place, but it is. Anyways, trying to get on the happy note, and I keep ending on a sad note, but yeah, we will let people know when we have those dates, and they'll be coming up. All right, everybody, take care, and thank you for being with us. For all those people, are we still on Facebook? Did we get kicked off? No, we didn't.
No, still on,
All right.
still on.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much.
I must not have
Thank
done my
you.
job. Bye, everybody.